Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Fridays with Keenan's Cutting Edge. My name is Jenna Labor, and I will be your host as we explore the dynamic world of Don Keenan's trial philosophy, The Cutting Edge. Those of you joining us live this afternoon will have the opportunity to ask questions of our speaker and interact and make comments, whatever you'd like to do. If you have a question or a comment, please type it into the comments section below, and we will be sure to address it. Episodes are released each week following the live broadcast, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and the alerts icon to make sure you don't miss an episode. Today, we have William Hagans with us out of Houston, Texas, to talk about civility and professionalism. This is a timely topic for me because of something Young Ji and I are dealing with right now in our firm. So I'm excited to learn more about it. William practices with his father in Houston, and we will put his contact information in the description below so that you can contact him directly with any questions you have about this topic or anything else, anything edge. William, please share with us how you maintain civility and professionalism in an adversarial system.
There's no short answer to doing that. I think that there is something to be said for thinking about things more in the small space as opposed to large spaces, and looking at items aside from how frustrated you've become with somebody for the last 6 to 8 months and trying to find a way to make this one issue easier to deal with than the larger overall issue. We all get frustrated with people. We all get frustrated with opposing counsel, with judges, with our clients sometimes. But it's important to always remember that we as lawyers are entrusted with the sort of power and responsibility that not many people are. And it's a profession, and it should be a profession of professionals, where we're all in it together. And so remembering that the folks on the other side, or the judge, or whomever you're having an issue with, has their own issues, has their own stresses, has their own person yelling at them when you're not around, is something really important for us to always remember.
That's a super good point. I mean, someone always has something else going on. My mom used to tell me, if anybody was ever rude to me, well, maybe their mother just died. And I'm like, oh, so I try to keep that in mind. It can be difficult though. William, share with us about your practice and how you got here and why this is a passionate topic for you.
So I started, I went to college at the University of Northern Iowa, of all places.
Interesting.
Played basketball up there. Found out that I don't know how to drive in snow. But what I started noticing is I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but the law classes in college were the ones that I just enjoyed myself in. And so I ended up getting a degree in political science, which of course means I had to go to graduate school of some sort. Ended up going to the University of Texas School of Law. And after that, went and worked at a 500 or so lawyer firm, Bracewell. At the time, Bracewell and Giuliani. I think that last name has been scrubbed pretty well from any firm.
Oh, some drama?
I do have a picture with Mayor Giuliani somewhere.
Yeah, that is a name that carries some interesting implications.
But I was lucky in that the lawyers I worked with at Bracewell also had a plaintiff's docket, and not just a hourly fee, oil company suing an operator docket, but contingency fee, personal injury, contingency fee, banking, contingency fee, commercial. And so I was lucky in that I got to handle some plaintiff's cases as well as defense cases, some hourly cases as well as contingency fee. And when I was in my 4th year at Bracewell, I had the opportunity to try a true to life contingency fee personal injury case where a FedEx delivery driver was out delivering a package and was hit by a tow truck. And another lawyer asked us to try it, and Bracewell asked me to go try it, even though I'd never tried a case. And I convinced my dad to sit second chair with me for free, which he's reminded me about a few times.
We'll owe him for life.
We got about a $2.6 million verdict
Awesome.
on that case with 1% liability on our client.
Okay.
So it was within a couple months, I decided to join his firm. And now we have a firm here in Houston with 7 lawyers. We try commercial cases, personal injury cases, legal malpractice cases, a whole array of cases. There aren't a ton of people who do contingency fee commercial cases. So we have a bit of a niche there where we handle those types of cases.
What did you learn? Oh, I'm sorry. Were you okay? What did you learn about civility and professionalism when you worked in that large firm, if you learned anything? And how did that change when you moved to the kind of the smaller firm scenario, if at all?
People might think, that there is less civility and professionalism at a large firm where there's kind of that cutthroat mentality. But I was lucky in that the partners I worked with, Ileana Blanco, Brian Dumas-Snell, especially an appellate lawyer here in Houston, he's still at Bracewell, Warren Harris, who's been a great mentor to me over the years. They took professionalism very seriously. And I'll always remember when I was probably a first year, maybe second year attorney, and there was a lawyer on the other side. I couldn't tell you what type of case it was. I couldn't even tell you what side of the case I was on. But as best I could tell, this lawyer was fighting with me just because he wanted to fight with me. And there's emails going back and forth. Everything is being turned into an issue. And my partner, Brian Dumas-Snell, on the case was being copied on everything. And finally, at one point, and this was on a Friday, he just replied to all and said, "Look, guys, I'm attaching a copy of the Texas Lawyers Creed. I'm going to read it over the weekend. I'd ask that y'all both read it over the weekend, and let's talk on Monday and try to be more productive." And I've always been so impressed with the way he did that. And he started it off with, and when I've done it since then, always started off with, I'm doing it too. I'm not casting aspersions. I'm not blaming you. I'm going to do it too. And it did. It made a difference. It made us find ways to work together. Again, it's a profession. We're in it together. And just picking apart at each other when there's no real good reason or end goal in sight doesn't do any of us any favors. It just diminishes the way we look to the public, to the judges, to referral sources. So finding ways to be professionals has always been something that the people I've worked with and the mentors I've had have seen as being an important thing. That's
awesome. Yeah, that's so great, because it's like if you bring yourself into the mix with it, even if you don't feel like you have been the one who's causing the problem, if you say, okay, listen, we're all over the place here. We're arguing. Obviously, we're not getting anywhere. Let's take a step back and see if we can get back on track. Like, right? All of us, not you. Stop being a jerk to me. Us all. Let's kind of get it together, because at the end of the day, I mean, realistically, we don't have a dispute with the other lawyer, right? I mean, Actually, I can think of an example of somebody I know who does have a dispute with another lawyer. So whenever they're against each other, it's gloves off. But for the most part, that's not our beef, right? It's between our clients.
And what we see sometimes, we know the emotion. Everybody who's been involved in a personal injury case knows the emotion that their clients have. In commercial cases where it's a company suing another company or an individual suing a company, and especially in legal malpractice cases where either we're representing an individual who's suing a law firm or we're representing a lawyer being sued by an individual, the emotions in those cases are just as high, if not higher sometimes, because it is sometimes people looking at, they're trying to take my company away from me. They're trying to take my livelihood away from me. And so we deal with a lot of that emotion in all of these cases. And so us trying to take the other lawyer out for lunch, call them before sending over a letter. Now with Zoom, being able to say, can we just talk face to face, even if they're in a different state, is something that diffuses things more often than I think people realize.
That's a good point. Communicating. And so, so many times, and I hate to sound like a grandma, but when you send a text message or an email, things can be misinterpreted, even if you send it with the best of intentions. Sometimes I'll read an email later that I sent. I'm like, oh, I guess I see where they were coming from, even though I certainly didn't mean it that way. Right. So clearing the air, getting on the phone, hopping on Zoom are really good ideas on how to just de-escalate.
There is no context in text messages.
Mm-hmm.
And I rarely, if ever, will text a lawyer on the other side.
Mm-hmm. I find like that written communication has its own love language, right? Everybody has a different way that they feel and receive and give love. It's the same way in text message or email, because I tend to try to be really efficient with my emails. So I get to the point and boom, get it over there. Somebody else might need some flowery language in the beginning, or they need to have a nice opening. How are you doing? How's your family? So it's very much different. And so, I think of the client that I'm currently representing in trial, and she had the wherewithal to tell me about her email love language. And she said, I need you to be very strict and very literal, because she has a brain injury. She's like, if there's any way I can read between the lines, I will. And I will be comatose for 2 days trying to figure out what you mean. And I thought, thank you for telling me that, because instead of blowing up at me, getting upset, and me being like, client's insane, we have been able to have better communication in that way. And just so everybody knows, she prefers to communicate via email. So it's kind of just a personal example of how, you got to be careful with how you're communicating with people in writing. Because like you said, William, there's no context.
Well, and there is a direct examination course in the KTI universe out there that talks about meeting with your client early on in the case and spending time with them. And I worry, I've seen, especially some of the defense lawyers, that will not have met their client until the deposition.
Mm-hmm.
And I know plenty of plaintiffs' lawyers who have 1,000 cases at any given time, and they're showing up to a hearing, shaking hands for the first time with the defense lawyer, introducing themselves, showing up to a deposition, having never met their client. It is so important to take that time to get to know your client, to get to know the defense lawyer, and spend some time getting to know who your judge is, if you're assigned to a judge.
That's a good point as well, right? Civility and professionalism with judges, especially when they want to run roughshod over your case and don't understand the law and are just drilling down and making your life miserable. Absolutely. What is an example of when you showed us an example of when a partner of yours was able to smooth over a situation and you learned from him. When have you been able to utilize that skill in a situation you've had recently?
I mean, I will show you an email. This was a couple years ago. And this is we had settled the case. And now this lawyer wanted to fight with me about everything. And so the email I sent her was, I need to see the red line version of the release you sent me. Now, we have the Texas Lawyers Creed, and a lot of people have something like that in a lot of other states, says you share the red line.
Mm-hmm.
She wouldn't do it. And so her email to me was, by the way, I didn't hang up on you. To the contrary, I remained on the line while you talked and did not until long after you stopped. I just had nothing else to say to you, so I just put the phone down. And so the email I sent back to her, realizing that we were at something of an impasse at this point, was, could you at least tell me what edits you made before I have to do a compare document between these documents? And said, I'm trying to understand what's going on here, but you won't let me talk. You keep interrupting me. And so just refusing to let me finish a sentence doesn't do either of us any good. And this was where I did the same sort of thing that, I said, please let us know what changes you made to the latest draft, and hopefully we can finalize and close this case. Again, we had settled the case.
Sometimes they just can't let it go. It's like, let it go, let it go.
I said, while I doubt you will take any suggestions from me earnestly, I think it is important at times like these to remember the Texas Lawyers Creed. Mm-hmm. I've just read over it again to remind myself of the way we should all strive to practice. I hope you will do the same. And I gave her the link to do so. And I don't know if that made a difference, but it did help, or we at least were able to get to a point of finalizing the settlement. So I want to believe it helped. I can't say for sure it did.
Well, even just a small reminder that there's somebody else looking over our shoulder, right? I mean, we get into these scuffles or whatever, but ultimately, if there's any, there might be a mediator who's going to have to come in and deal with this, or there might be a judge or the bar association or whoever. There's several different people looking over our shoulder because we've got rules that other people have made for our profession that we're supposed to follow. We didn't come up with those rules on our own. We're not making that from our law firm to yours. Those are things that other people have said because that's the way the community expects us to behave, right?
And in this case, it's our community. Mm-hmm. It's a smaller community. It's our profession, how we should work with each other. And while I appreciate what you said, in fairness, my dad was one of the authors of the Texas Lawyers Creed.
Okay, well, barring that person being in your life, I have no lawyers in my family, so.
Well, and I will, since we're talking about it a little bit, I do want to just share a little bit. And let me see if I can do this. So, 1989, the Texas Supreme Court Justice Eugene Cook, who has been called the father of professionalism in Texas, he formed a committee on professionalism. And part of the reason was the perceived increase in frequency in which attorneys were misusing and abusing the rules, particularly the discovery rules. This was the so-called Rambo litigation of the 1980s. And the major issue that Justice Cook and others around the state were seeing was a perceived deterioration of civility in the way lawyers treated each other. There was also a perceived loss of respect for the judicial system and the legal profession that we were seeing outside of the bar, that the community was actually seeing. Because Justice Cook, in his infinite wisdom, wanted to ensure the committee's work would encompass all members of the bar, he appointed a Houston plaintiff's lawyer, Fred Hagans, and a Dallas defense lawyer, Blackie Holmes, as co-chairs of the committee. Now, my dad and Blackie became good friends, but there has always been a tension between Houston and Dallas. And so making these two be the chairs of the committee could have been a bigger issue than it ended up being.
It's almost like it speaks volumes to what they were really trying to accomplish here.
Yes. Now, within about 2 months, and this was 1989, there was no email back then. So within a couple months, the committee was already exchanging at least close to final drafts, which is something I can't even imagine today's world, a group of lawyers and judges around the state putting together something that has never existed anywhere in the country in just a couple months and agreeing on it. By October, a final draft of the creed was ready for the Texas Supreme Court to consider and adopt. And on November, and by the way, all of Justice Cook's notes and documents are available on the Texas Professionalism website, which are kind of amazing to look through.
Like the Declaration of Independence there, all the signatures.
Well, and it's on November 7th of 1989, both the Texas Supreme Court and the Court of Criminal Appeals, because we have in Texas a separate civil Supreme Court and Court of Criminal Appeals, adopted unanimously the Texas Lawyers Creed, a mandate for professionalism. And we have seen it, and this is the entire creed. It's, our legal system, lawyer to client, lawyer, and lawyer and judge, kind of the main pillars of professionalism. And it hasn't changed since 1989. There's not really any need to, I don't think. But we have seen it adopted in some version in other states. And of course, we like to look for shortened versions of things and kind of bumper stickers. And at the end of the day, mind your manners, tell the truth, know the law. That's if you do that, I think you're considered professional.
That's fair. I think that's a great summary of it. Can you share a time when you've had to exercise civility and professionalism with a colleague, it may be in your firm, not necessarily opposing counsel, or a client, so somebody's kind of on your side?
So, like I say, we sometimes have commercial clients, CEOs, presidents of companies. Usually we represent the smaller company suing the bigger company, but we've represented Fortune 100 companies also. Owners of companies, CEOs of companies do not always want to listen to sound legal advice.
To see that.
And sometimes people think that they know better than the lawyer. And we have seen companies want us to put into settlement agreements things that don't make any sense whatsoever, or send demand letters that we couldn't get even if we had our best day in court. We're not getting that. We can get attorney's fees in a lot of cases, but not in, for instance, a professional negligence case. And we'll have people say, well, but we should get send a letter saying we want, $5 million plus $2 million of attorney's fees. What are we going to get out of that? And so it requires, one, earning your client's trust and being able to talk to them about what you can do, what you can't do, what the options are, all of those sorts of things. But just like with a personal injury client or anybody else, you have to spend that time to earn the client's trust and, convince them through both the way you act, the way you handle things, the way you research, convince them that you have the ability to do it and you do know what you're doing. So I think that's the hardest thing sometimes. If we don't spend the time with our clients, whether it's a person injured in a car wreck or somebody who has had a contract breached, if we don't spend the time with them, they're going to go off of what they heard on TV or what their friend told them or what, they just believe and not necessarily trust us.
What are some ways that you like to get your clients to trust you?
Always returning their phone calls. I mean, the folks I've known that are on disciplinary committees and things like that, the number one issue they have, the number one reason that people file grievances is phone calls. They're not getting return phone calls. And we see this in medical malpractice also. If a doctor has a really good relationship with somebody, is answering their questions, is spending time with them, even if that doctor screws up, the patient is less likely to want to pursue a malpractice claim. And spending time with clients, answering phone calls, returning emails, talk to them, about whatever the issue is, even if you talked about it with them 16 different times. Just having that line of communication. And I think you and I have talked about, and we've heard Lynn Gabay talk about it, we've heard Don Keenan talk about it. Reducing the amount of cases you have gives you the ability to actually do that. We have maybe 25 cases at our firm at any given time with 7 lawyers. We have the ability, anybody in our office, if we're not in trial, has the ability to talk to those clients when they call. And we're only going to take the cases with the clients that we want to work with.
Absolutely. That's so important. I mean, if you get to a point where you are choosing the client as well as the case, that makes everybody's life easier. And I mean, I just remember when we started our firm, we didn't have that luxury because we had couldn't even afford an office or anything like that. So we were pulling in everything that came through the door. But the first thing we did as soon as things started kind of picking up financially was to be like, listen, we are not taking certain types of clients that don't work with our personality. And it's just like we tell juries, right? You might not be the right fit for this case. I might not be the right lawyer for you, but that doesn't mean that there isn't someone else out there. So, I mean, to extend it a little bit further on clients, the civility and professionalism of rejecting a case so that you can get that caseload down and give the attention to your other clients that you need, spending the time with that person, answering any questions they have, and then gently sending them to 3 or 4 other people who might be able to assist them. But I love, your example of getting your clients to trust you, returning their phone calls, giving them time. And you're right. That's the only way you can do that is if you have gotten your caseload down to a place where you feel like, you can dedicate time that's needed. These cases take a ton of time, especially if you're going to do it the way that Don Keenan teaches us to do it. You've got to get your caseload down so you can do all of these things that William's talking about.
My dad has been practicing coming up on 50 years. And he has said for a long time, he has never once regretted turning the case down.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's fantastic because I've also always heard that you make the most money on the cases you've turned down, right? Kind of a similar idea where you're not spinning your wheels. We used to have a pretty high volume workers' compensation practice in our firm. And in Washington, that's a little bit different because paralegals actually can pretty much do everything in a workers' comp case up to when you're actually appearing at the Board of Industrial Assurance Appeals. But those folks, in addition to our plaintiff's lawyer, or excuse me, our personal injury clients would call constantly. I mean, just constantly. And it just kind of built up resentment in us because we were constantly on the, like, we're constantly responding, right? We're always on the defense. So we implemented early on, and actually I have to give credit where credit is due. My husband thought of this, do 30-day check-ins. So you're touching every case every 30 days. Even if the client hasn't called you in a couple of weeks, you make that call or send an email, whatever their preferred method of communication is. And just like that, it turned around. We were no longer fielding phone calls and feeling stressed out because we were receiving so many questions. We were anticipating them. We were getting in there first. And the clients felt, they felt heard, they felt seen. They were like, they didn't feel like there was so much uncertainty around what was going on in their cases. And that repaired a lot of relationships that I think staved off several bar complaints, or at least complaints up to the disciplinary committee about us not answering phone calls every single day. So it works. It works, folks. It works.
There's nothing that can make up for just talking to people. To just people need. My fiance is a physical therapist. She has her doctorate degree in physical therapy, and she'll tell me about some of her patients that come into the clinic, and they will want to talk to her about their entire medical history for the entire hour. Mm-hmm. And I tell her that's because she's the first doctor they have ever been in a room with and had an hour of undivided attention.
Yep. Mm-hmm. They want to be listened to. And I mean, when you think about it, that's what we all need, is that validation that we're not just, that nobody's hearing us and that we're just on an island on our own. It's, especially when you're in a really vulnerable place, like you've been injured, right? You don't know what your future holds. What if your case goes to hell in a handbasket? You don't know. And that's a terrifying place to be.
When people come to us, same thing, I'm sure with you, almost always it's because they have no other option. And we are their last line of trying to get a remedy. And we've had clients who, at the end of a case, say, I never expected anything because everybody had told me that there's nothing there, that it's, this was our fault or whatever it is. You're the only one that believed in us. And even in cases that we haven't gotten great results in, because we believed them, because we believed in them as people, makes all the difference in the world.
Yep, absolutely. I had a client once, and I knew his case was worth so much more than he ended up taking at mediation. I was actually very upset with the mediator. Back then, I didn't know about how to control mediators, right? And the purpose of mediation that we all learn at the mediation college and EDGE. But so the mediator really beat my client down. And at the end of the day, he took a settlement that I was very disappointed in, but of course that's his choice, right? He was ecstatic. He thought, he sent me Christmas text messages, just holiday messages, things like that for years after. And I thought, dude, you didn't even get nothing, basically even out of, we had to cut attorney's fees, costs, everything else. There was a big compromise to do this little settlement on a case that was worth much more. But because we spent the time and we did this whole thing, we litigated for him, we fought for him, we went to this mediation, everything else. He just thought that was just the cat's meow. It was the coolest thing to him. And I bet he's actually sent us clients since. So it's not about getting them all the money in the world. It's about validating who they are, what they're going through. And don't take tiny settlements for your clients. Control your mediators. Okay, everybody. I don't want to send the wrong message here, but it's you're going to still get the love and respect of your clients when you do them justice in that personal way. Let's see. You talked a little bit, William, about your prior mentors, but is there anybody who exemplifies civility to you? I'm sure maybe your dad or, anybody else that who just does this well on a regular basis.
The easy answer is my dad. I've had him as a mentor, even when I was at a big law firm. Granted, he also started at that same law firm and worked there for 10 years. And then after I left the firm, my little sister graduated from law school and she worked at the firm for a couple of years. So we've all worked there. But he was an example. But I mean, there's other examples in just daily life where you call somebody. I called Tony Seaton back in November. Some friends of mine were driving home from dinner in Nashville and were hit by a drunk driver. The guy had no insurance, no driver's license, and Tony was like out hiking or camping somewhere, but returned my phone call. We talked about what was going on in Nashville, and he said there's never going to be enough money in the UIM or anywhere to pay these guys for what they went through. And I agree with him. I mean, I have now settled all of their cases. We got about $500,000. There are 4 different UIM companies, but neither Tony nor I took any fee on the case, but he was there to answer any question I had, whether it was through email or phone. And it wasn't because he was going to make a bunch of money. It wasn't because I was going to refer cases to him. But he's another great example of somebody who is just always there for anybody who needs him. He and I have argued about things at courses before, different things. But anytime we see each other, we'll hug and talk about whatever we're talking about. And so it's people like that, and we see them so much in some of the relationships we've made through KTI and things like that. Having that sort of professionalism and the ability to look for what's best for the client, what's best for the situation, instead of thinking about ourselves first.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think too, that goes to when you react to something, instead of taking it personally, right? Whether we all have disagreements at one time or another, but usually it's not something personal. It's whether, okay, do I file this motion or not? Or do I include this language or not? And it's not somebody personally attacking us usually. And, to kind of bring it away from that personal thing and just say, okay, when we have disagreements, I can still really care about who you are and enjoy who you are as a person and respect you, right?
And even if you don't like somebody, respecting them as a professional, and looking, even if they're not always professional, looking for ways to diffuse situations and focus on the big picture is very important.
Yep. I will say that there have been times by the time I get to trial, I'm not my client's biggest fan. I get, and that's something I try to work on, but it's a reality of the situation, right? But does it change the fact that I get into that courtroom and I do every single thing I possibly can for them? No, because there's a job to be done and it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with what's right.
I've told many clients, we can go to trial if you want to. Here's what the range of settlement is, where they are, where we might be able to get them. We can go to trial, and I promise you I'm going to enjoy it. Mm-hmm. You are not. I just need you to understand, you are not going to enjoy trial.
Not a fun place to be for a
I'm going to love it.
Yeah.
But it's, and getting into, our firm especially, we talk to our clients about risk.
Mm.
Where does the risk transfer? Why do you have to consider this versus that? And I think spending that time with them, talking to them about kind of where we see the risk transferring. Now, that doesn't mean we don't keep pushing, of course, but letting them make that informed decision, I think is another part of it.
Yeah, definitely. Getting them to the point. I always feel like if I get to my client's number, right, a lot of times they'll say, this is what I'd be happy with. I always tell them, I'm like, this is on the table and I can get it for you. Would you give me another month to see how much farther I can push it? And if they say no, all right, cool, we got your number, let's take it. But most of the times they're like, sure, take another couple months, see if you can get me another few $1,000s. And, but giving them that control, again, the validation it's very, it's a good relationship builder. It's a good confidence builder for them. And then also, then they're not going to be like, take it to trial when it's not a good idea. Right. All right. I have a question actually for you, William, from the audience.
Okay.
Dennis Phillips asks, how do you recommend dealing with a quote problem client, unquote? For example, a client who power calls you and you have to repeat yourself and tell them the entire history of the law.
There are always clients that we have to tell them we can't represent them anymore. And it may be that it's because there's a conflict of personalities, because something has come up that we weren't expecting or didn't know about or they didn't tell us about. If it is a client that is absolutely driving somebody crazy, that they may just need somebody else. And we as lawyers should look for ways in a situation like that, not to say, oh, and by the way, I still have $10,000 of expenses that you owe me, but to find a way to say, I'm going to help you find somebody else. I'm going to, we'll figure that stuff out. But not think about it as a business. Think about it as putting the clients first. I mean, we should always put the clients first, but it's tough in a situation like that where you have to terminate a client who may have a really good case, but because it's taking you away from everything else, looking for a way to find somebody else. And by that point, you should know, okay, here's what the client's attitude and personality is. There's somebody, you should be able to find somebody that can deal with that better. And sometimes it's moving somebody from a single, solo practitioner to a larger firm where they have, an associate or a paralegal who can spend some of that time with somebody. And sometimes, joint venturing a case. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but one of my favorite things in the world is being able to joint venture a case with somebody. And I steal, we all do, but I'm unapologetic about it. I steal ideas and techniques from other lawyers, whether they're involved in KTI or not. Jim Sanford up in Dallas called me a few months ago and said, I'm going to come try a case down just outside of Houston, and wanted to bounce some ideas off of me. And I ended up helping, sitting with him for the entire trial, cross-examining one of the witnesses, helping with the jury charge. And he ended up getting a outstanding verdict for somebody who was wronged. The guy was fired without cause, and then they tried to create cause later on. The jury was out for less than 45 minutes before they said Jim his client was owed everything. And then we got to go get attorney's fees. But working with other lawyers in Houston, in Texas, or elsewhere is one of my favorite things to do. And I realized that I just went way off the question. I hope I answered the original question before bragging.
Yeah, I think
what a great job Jim did.
Getting somebody else on board who has a little bit of a different personality, or has a different skill set. Absolutely. Right. because you, like you said, you learn more. Then you in the meantime get to be able to have access to different things and opportunities. Having a frank conversation with the person about maybe we're not the right fit. I think,
Doing that in person.
yeah.
Don't do that over the phone, please. Don't do it while you're driving home on your cell phone. Doing it in person, doing it over Zoom, finding a way to do that person to person.
And I think another way, Dennis, is to try to find out why there's this issue. I mean, is it really is it a trust issue? And I don't know how far along you are in the case with the client that you're thinking of, because of course at a certain point you can't withdraw. You certainly can bring somebody else in, but try to, maybe say very respectfully, sir or ma'am, how, what's going on? Are you okay? Is there something that, are you having a hard time remembering? Is it a brain injury client and they don't remember? Honestly, sometimes it is so hard for me to be patient with brain injury clients because they appear fine and I'm talking to them and they appear fine. And then the next, day they don't remember. Or is it a stress thing? People have, some people have a type A personality, probably most people watching this, and some of our clients do as well, where they want to know exactly what's going on. And because they don't really understand it, right? It's not really part of something they can truly grasp. They forget it quickly and then they need to hear it again. So you can kind of work through some of those things by trying to drill down to what the reason is behind it. Maybe you can have a conversation and follow up with a written email or letter, and that might assist. So then go back. I have had to do this with clients before. Remember when I sent you that email? Go back and take a look at it real quick. Anytime you have a question about this, go back and check that out. And then if you still have questions, feel free to call me. I think getting down to the nuts and bolts of why, it will help some. And then do exactly what William said. If you got to let them go, you got to let them go. Or if you got to bring someone else in, bring someone else in, because it just happens sometimes. We represent all kinds of different people in the world.
And if you've never represented another lawyer, you don't know what getting stern
power calls. So
we have had to have that conversation with lawyers before, that we, in this case, we are the lawyers, and then we can move forward.
Yeah, we had a case, actually our own. It was a litigation for our trademark, our law firm name, with another person, and I know we were the worst clients. And we fired like 2 or 3 different lawyers, and we were terrible because we were like, no, I mean, granted, we go above and beyond for our clients. So we expect the lawyers to go above and beyond for us. And it wasn't happening. And they also weren't litigators. So they didn't know how to do anything. But that's a certain personality, right? And especially with lawyers or other professionals, right? You talked about CEOs, William, and people who are high up in their companies. I mean, they're smart people. Regular clients are smart people too, but they may have a specialized area of expertise that they feel they need to share with you. And you know what? It just might not work out. G and I represented ourselves and got an awesome settlement. So sometimes they just need to go on their way and do their own thing. So just know when that's the right time and do it respectfully. William, what advice do you have kind of overall to people who are struggling? I mean, we deal with this every day. We deal with conflicts every day. Our whole practice is conflict with everybody, with doctors, with lawyers, with our clients, with the judges. I mean, with everybody. What's kind of your bottom line advice?
I think finding, not necessarily a mentor, but finding somebody else, either in your firm or in your town, or frankly, somebody who has these sort of experience, kind of knows what you're doing, knows the issues you're dealing with, and having somebody you can talk to that will listen to you, even if they don't give you much advice, but will listen to you and talk to you. And like I said, I mean, there are so many folks involved with KTI, with the different lawyer groups that are willing to do it, and people will sometimes say, well, how do I even find a mentor? And I point out that, the Houston Bar Association has a whole mentorship group. Nobody knows about it. But finding somebody who you can talk to, sometimes it's a spouse, but I think a lot of times we just need somebody to vent to, because our jobs are stressful. They're always going to be, especially as litigators, which it isn't to take away from corporate lawyers who have their own stresses, but as litigators and as plaintiff's trial lawyers, our client's entire future hangs on every move we make, every question we ask, and we should feel that pressure. It's good to feel that pressure, but we can't let it overtake us. And so I think the most important thing is finding somebody or a couple of folks that you can just talk to and spend time with, who can let you know that you're not totally losing your mind, but can just talk to you about it.
Absolutely. A good support system. Papa Don talked in, I think it was our New Year's Eve episode, about having a place to go that's quiet and peaceful. Or do you have anything like that, William? Any place you go? Or I guess you could go to a person for refuge too.
So we have a house that's about 45 minutes north of Houston on Lake Conroe, that my fiance and I will go up. And granted, I have the full office set up there. All I have to do is bring my laptop. I've got the same camera, the same microphone. I can fully work from there. But I can also turn things off and sit outside and watch the sunset. And there is something to be said about just enjoying nature, enjoying a cool breeze, watching the waves come in, and not always being in the office. Just please don't tell my dad I said that.
Tell him to skip this episode
every day, including Saturday and Sunday.
Late into the evening, always.
But he now sometimes brings his dog up to the office with him. So.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, gosh. And being from the Pacific Northwest, dogs are a huge part of everybody's life. So there's dogs on dogs in offices and public spaces everywhere.
Every office should be dog friendly.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, William, for being with us here today and talking about civility and professionalism. We certainly are in one profession where those two qualities are very difficult to maintain. And I would encourage anybody out there who has questions about how to navigate this difficult field to reach out to William, because he clearly has an expertise and a passion for being civil and professional. All right, so I am in trial as we speak. So the next couple of weeks, we don't have any planned speakers. However, and I'm saying a big if here, depending on how my trial goes, I may do a debrief with you guys, maybe either next week or the week after. So that might fill up. And so watch your emails to see if there will be anything then. But we do have on April 29th, beginning our speaker series about the KTI College. So I'm going to bring in faculty. Well, Benji actually kicked it off, if you recall. I'm going to bring in faculty and everybody from the colleges to just kind of give us a rundown. Like, what are these colleges about? What can we expect out of them? And why do we need to go to them? Now, these podcast episodes are not a replacement for actually attending any of the colleges or the seminars or the webinars or any of the other resources, but it's an opportunity to get an idea straight from the horse's mouth about what you're going to be learning and the value of those courses. So Gus Brown is going to bring us back into that topic with the KTI undergraduate focus groups on April 29th. And then we've got several weeks of just really good, solid discussion on what can KTI do for you. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us again on Keenan's Fridays with Keenan's Cutting Edge. My brain just turns into mush when I'm in trial. So I'm surprised I've been able to keep it together throughout this whole interview. But I hope you joined.
What makes you think you did?
I don't know. And I will have to rewatch it. Actually, I will not rewatch it because that will be terrifying.
I'll leave you with one quick thing.
Okay, go for it.
Words to live by. Justice Potter Stewart said, ethics is knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do.
Yes, that is true.
There ain't no right way to do the wrong thing. That's credited to Waylon Jennings, but the most important thing is that you'll never be as cool as Waylon Jennings
With Big Bird?
driving an old truck with Big Bird riding shotgun.
That is a level of cool that I can only hope to attain someday. All right. Thank you, William. And if anybody has questions, please reach out to him. Look forward to hearing from Gus in the next few weeks and possibly a debrief from me if I feel up to it and you guys feel like hearing it. So have a wonderful weekend and I will see all of you next time.